The year is 1711. 8 women appear in a courtroom in Carrickfergus, County Antrim, to stand trial for the bewitchment and torment of an 18-year-old local girl, Mary Dunbar. A key witness in the trial, Mary had been plagued for months by these 8 women in spectral form, standing over her as she slept, reciting incantations that caused her great pain and sent her into numerous convulsions. She vomited household items and could barely speak out of fear. All 8 women were deemed guilty of the crime of performing rituals on Mary. Catherine McCammond, Janet Liston, Elizabeth Seller, Janet Carson, Janet Main, Janet Miller, Janet Latimer, and Margaret Mitchell. They were imprisoned for 12 months, with 4 stints on the stocks in Carrickfergus. This is a story about politics, fear, religion, society, and magic. But more importantly, about stories and words, and how powerful they can be. These women and their lives could have been lost to history, but live on in personal stories and historical records of one of Ireland's most notorious witch trials. During the 16th centuries and 17th centuries, 50,000 people were executed for practicing witchcraft in Europe, and records show that 80% of these were women. With prolific witch hunts happening across England and Scotland, the newly arrived Presbyterian Scottish settlers in Ireland brought with them new opinions and beliefs, and an existing fear of a dark, satanic witch. In Ireland, an act was passed in 1568 that stated, if you harmed using magical means, you were punished with a year's imprisonment and 4 stints in the stocks on market day. If you killed by using magical means, you were trialed as a criminal and hung.
Presbyterians in Ireland in the 17th and 18th century are largely of Scottish origin. By the 18th century, Presbyterianism is the official religion in Scotland. It's the religion of the majority of the people. So most Irish Presbyterians, though not all, will be of Scottish ancestry. Many of them will have moved to Ireland across the course of the 17th century. Probably the biggest influx of Scottish people occurs in the 1690s. The 1690s is a period of particular hardship in Scotland. In many places it turns into famine. And so large numbers of Scottish people seek to escape from Scotland. Some cross the Atlantic, many more come to Ireland. So communities like Islandmagee or other parts of counties Antrim and Down will be largely Presbyterian, largely of Scottish origin, many of them 2nd, 3rd, or even more generations in Ireland, some relatively recent arrivals. As would be common across Europe, 17th and 18th century Ireland have very defined gender roles. Public office, professions, many other economic activities would be restricted to men. Men will have more in the way of property rights than women. Access to universities would be restricted to men. Within religious communities, all clergy across principal denominations will all be men.
The majority of the population through the early modern period believe in a limited witch figure. It's sometimes shadowy. It is a witch, usually female, who steals either milk in the form of a hare, transmogrification, or you get them stealing the ability to churn butter from milk. They're more easily countered by magical, counter-magical means than the Malfique witch. What you have is a witch that attacks agricultural produce at certain times of the ritual year. There is no satanic input, and so they're not much of a threat. Therefore, the majority of the Gaelic Irish population don't bring accusations, and they don't generate trials. Witches in the demonic Malfique variant of witchcraft belief that you have in the Protestant settler areas, that is a frightening witch. In the settler Protestant areas, they do believe that they're frightening, they do believe that they harm life and limb, and they make accusations. But these accusations do not end in witch trials very often. In Ireland, there's only 4 witch trials. People believe in witchcraft. They're accusing neighbours of doing it, but the local justice of the peace are not taking it forward. They're not prosecuting the people. The popular conception is the Presbyterian Church drove these accusations. Well, they didn't. They actually stopped them. They arbitrated. They got the accuser and the accused together. They got them to make up, or they did the accuser for slander because it's a church court. They don't have criminal jurisdiction, so they would just get them in front of the church to say sorry, basically. But it worked.
In 1710, Anne Haltridge, a pious woman, lived with her son and his family in the house she had built with her late husband, Reverend John Haltridge. In September 1710, supernatural disturbances started to occur around the house and were centred on Anne. These disturbances followed her into the year 1711.
What happens is stone thrown, lithobolia, thrown at the house through the windows. You get objects moving on their own. You get pillows walking through the kitchen. You get ghostly presence, and it's centred on Anne Haltridge crawling over her body. But also you get a demonic figure. What happens at this time? She starts getting stabbing pains in her back. It's interpreted as witchcraft. And what happens is she leaves the room that she's in because she's stalwart. She says, she's very religious.
Anne Haltridge tried to fight the forces of evil, but within a week, she passed away. Mary Dunbar, Anne's 17-year-old niece, arrived from Castlereagh to be with her family in their mourning. Upon arrival, Mary explored the house and opened the parlour, which had been mysteriously locked since Anne's passing. She discovered Anne's apron, which had been tucked away, hidden out of sight. The apron was rolled up and tied together in 5 knots, each knot symbolising each point of the witch's pentagram: air, water, earth, fire, and spirit. Startled with this discovery, Mary untied the knots, fearing her aunt was performing witchcraft. Immediately, Mary was seized with a violent pain in her thigh and fell into fits and ravings. Later that afternoon, on recovering from this experience, Mary claimed she was being tormented by several women, whose appearances she was able to document. The causes of these episodes still remain a mystery to this day.
Everything that was happened before happens again. By this point, it's been recategorised a wee bit as demonic obsession. Now, demonic obsession is related to demonic possession, but it's a bit different. That's where a demon is obsessing around a person, and demonic obsession is a precursor to the demon getting inside you. Mary Dunbar, she starts to get all the symptoms of possession. She goes into convulsions, she has fits, she loses the power of speech, she can't eat, she levitates, she vomits household objects, and she also sees spectral images of 8 women throughout the month of March who are attacking him in special form. Now, the 8 women over the month of March are tracked down. They're tested to see whether there's a reaction when she comes into the room. They're also blind tested just to see whether she's lying, which has been used in demonic possession cases in England before. She goes into a fit when they enter the room, or she can identify them. These women that she is picking out are believable witches. In this point in time, and what you have is disability being linked to the demonic. The inner corruption of an individual comes out in the way they look. One of them has what they call, in the parlance of the day, a club foot. One has lost an eye. There's various facial disfigurement caused by falling in a fire and smallpox. Now, they may have been accused because of this. So these women do not reach or match the ideal of beauty, because of the way they look. The way they act, they swear, they smoke, they resist arrest. They are also seen as them challenging accepted patriarchal, male-dominated ideas of what it is to be a woman. If you challenge accepted gender binary roles in the society, whether you're a man or a woman, you up your chances of being accused and prosecuted for witchcraft.
All 8 accused women were placed in iron and took the stand one by one. The jury was made up of local people who regularly attended church. Conclusively, Judge Upton, who led the trial, directed the jury that they could not find these women guilty due to the lack of physical evidence and the sole testimony of a young girl unable to speak. While the accused women regularly attended public worship, they were often seen as outcasts in their community. The court erupted, shouting and swearing at the women, and after a long 9 hours of argument, all 8 women were convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to 12 months imprisonment and 4 stints on the stocks in Carrickfergus. Catherine McCammond already had a bad reputation in the community. Janet Liston was married to William Seller and had a long-standing reputation for witchcraft. Elizabeth Seller was the daughter of Janet Liston and was the youngest of the witches convicted. At age 17, she was the same age as Mary Dunbar and was described as small, pretty, but lame of leg. Janet Carson was convicted despite her daughters trying desperately to defend against these accusations. Janet Main was known locally as an irreligious woman with a bad temper. She had a rough appearance and suffered from severe arthritis, and, according to Mary Dunbar, she was the ringleader. Janet Miller was blind in one eye and was heavily scarred across her body from a previous accident where she fell into a fire. Janet Latimer had long black hair with a bad temper and possessed a reputation for low morals. Margaret Mitchell, also known as Mistress Anne, was accused of being Mary Dunbar's most aggressive tormentor. These women were abandoned by their community, rejecting society's gender roles that had been in place for generations. They opted to live without judgment from the various societal classes of the time. But this was something society could not understand, and therefore these women were condemned. Mysteriously, Mary Dunbar's symptoms did not stop after these women were arrested. She continued with her accusations against even more women, all of whom were found innocent. However, 3 weeks after the trials, Mary Dunbar died of mysterious causes. Her last accusation was aimed towards a man, William Seller, who was blamed for her death. William Seller, a husband and a father to 2 of the previously accused witches, was convicted as a criminal, found guilty, and hung.
The idea that they're pious and that they were weak came through in this public discourse, and I think that the historical work that I've done on this shows that they weren't. So public discourse gives you a very politicised sometimes view of the Islandmagee witches and perpetuates myths. And the political view of the politicisation would be the Protestant settlers brought it with them. But you will see throughout the 19th century, people throughout Ireland accusing each other of witchcraft. Now it's more of an amalgam between Malfic and demonic witchcraft, because it's almost as if the Protestant idea is spread, and you'll see people shooting each other, stabbing each other, doing each other for slander, they're prosecuting each other for assault. Underlying this is witchcraft accusation. Now, there's no law after 1821 to prosecute witches by, so they take matters into their own hands. Within Islandmagee itself, specific places are associated with the Islandmagee witches. Almost a kind of informal dark heritage around the Islandmagee witches as well, are passed down from family to family. Because a lot of the people involved and a lot of the witches, their relatives and ancestors lived in the area, and so you get them talking about the witchcraft trial. So it's a kind of oral tradition within the community that keeps this alive, and it's very important to them. But it also keeps alive belief in witchcraft. This is used as proof it still exists, it can still harm us, and that is why they don't go near these places, right, at Islandmagee, because they're saying this is residual supernatural horror, and they can still hurt us now throughout these centuries.
No one knows, to this day, if Mary Dunbar's accusations were true, but the fear these stories brought to their community turned neighbour against neighbour and friend into foe. Fear is powerful, and in a small community, like the one in Islandmagee, in times of crisis, it can pull a community apart instead of bringing it together, and make a devil out of the most devoted believer.